Welcome back to my lodge. My name is Rory, and this is the Fireside Fairytales. What we do on this show is we talk about old fairy tales. Well, read them. And within that, because they are so similar, old mythology. And this month, we've been looking more at mythology, strictly mythology, than anything else. And specifically, we've been looking at Norse mythology. So, if anybody's out there in Chatland and can let me know how the sound is going, I'd love to know, because as you know, I can't always tell. So we have quite a bit to do today, so I don't want to spend too much time blabbing ahead of time. But what we're going to do today is answer the question that you probably clicked on this video for, which is, why does Odin have an eye patch? He's a very mighty warrior. He's Odin the All-Father. Is it just an old battle injury? Well, it's not. I will sort of spoil the surprise a bit there. It's not a battle injury. So we're going to read the stories required to understand why he doesn't have his eye. And unfortunately, because I can't assume you know much about Norse mythology, that does mean we'll have to read a little bit of a myth first, a kind of preamble, a prologue, if you will, that concerns somebody that you probably are familiar with, named Heimdall. Heimdall is in the Marvel versions of Norse mythology, movies. I'm blanking on the name of the wonderful actor who plays him. He's an English gentleman. Anyways, he guards the gate to the Rainbow Bridge, which is a real thing, by the way. That wasn't made up by Marvel. And Heimdall does about the same thing here. Pretty similar, actually. And the first story we're going to read, actually, is Heimdall telling Hnossa, this younger spiritual figure, about the birthing of Yggdrasil, which is important for knowing why Odin lost his eye. And if all of that, you're like, what is this noise I hear? Why do you keep making these sounds? There are a lot of strange names to our tongue in here. I'm going to do my best to pronounce them. I apologize if you come from a language who finds its origins in this, because I'm sure you would do better than me. But I certainly will put my effort in. So Yggdrasil is the world tree, kind of the universe as a whole. And where we're going to start is a little description of where it comes from. Framed as a story being told to Hnossa by Heimdall. All right. Now this lovely picture is basically it. Pardon me, I have a bit of a catch there. Which is going to be a problem for the voice I'm going to have to do here. And that's basically what this intro is. So we're going to read this, and then we're going to get more specifically to Odin. If you're watching this recorded later, and you do already know basically the background about the wells and the Yggdrasil and the giants and all that, and Odin's origins, you can probably look down in the description. There'll probably be a hot link that will take you further in the video and just give you the story of Odin and how he lost his eye. So this is Heimdall and little Hnossa, How All Things Came to Be. And this is from a book called The Children of Odin, Book of Northern Myths, turn of the century sort of translation interpretation that you can find at Project Gutenberg. Hnossa, the child of Freya, and the lost Odur, was the youngest of all the dwellers in Asgard. And because it had been prophesied that, that the child would bring her father and her mother together, little Hnossa was often taken without the city of gods to stand by Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, so that she might greet Odin if his steps turned towards Asgard. And Bifrost literally is a rainbow bridge, and that's why she sees Heimdall. In all the palaces of the city of the gods, little Hnossa was made welcome. In Fensaril, the halls of mists, where Frigga, the wife of Odin Allfather, sat spinning with golden threads, and Brida Bruk, where Balder, the well-beloved, lived with his fair wife, the young Nanna, in Bilskirnir, the winding house where Thor and Sif lived, and in Odin's own palace, Valaskjof, where that was all roofed over with silver shields. The greatest of all the palaces was Gladsheim. That was built by the golden-leaved wood, Glacier. Here the banquets of the gods were held. Often little Hnossa looked within and saw Odin Allfather seated at the banquet table with a mantle of blue over him and a shining helmet shaped like an eagle upon his head. Odin would sit there, not eating at all, but drinking the wine of the gods and taking the food off the table and giving it to Gari and Freki, the two wolves crouched beside his seat. She loved to go outside the great gate and stay beside Heimdall, the warder of the Rainbow Bridge. There, when there was no one crossing that she might watch, she would sit beside Heimdall and listen to the wonders that he spoke of. Heimdall held in his hand the horn that was called Gjallarhorn. He would sound it to let the dwellers in Asgard know that one was crossing the Rainbow Bridge, and Heimdall told little Hnossa how he had trained himself to hear the grasses grow, and how he could see all around him for 100 miles. He could see in the night as well as the day. He never slept. He had 9 mothers, he told Hnossa, and he fed on the strength of the earth and the cold of the sea. As she sat beside him day after day, Heimdall would tell little Hnossa how all things began. He had lived from the beginning of time, and he knew all things. Before Asgard was built, he said, and before Odin lived, earth and sea and sky were all mixed together. What was then was the chasm of chasms. In the north there was Niflheim, the place of deadly cold. In the south there was Muspelheim, the land of fire. In Niflheim there was a cauldron called Hvilgame that poured out 12 rivers that flowed into the chasm of chasm. Geninagap, the chasm of chasm, filled up with ice, for the waters of the river froze as they poured into it. From Muspelheim came clouds of fire that turned ice into thick mists. The mists fell down again in drops of dew, and from these dew were formed Ymir, the ancient giant. Ymir, the ancient giant, traveled along by the 12 rivers until he came to where another living form was standing in the midst. This was a giant cow. Aldhumla, that was the name of that cow. Ymir lay down beside her and drank her milk, and on the milk she gave him he lived. Other beings were formed out of the dew that fell to the ground. They were the daughters of the frost, and Ymir, the ancient giant, married one, and their children were giants. One day Ymir saw Aldahumla breathe upon a cliff of ice and lick with her tongue the place she breathed on. As her tongue went over and over the place, he saw that a figure was being formed. It was not like a giant's form. It was more shapely and more beautiful. A head appeared in the cliff, and golden air fell over the ice. As Ymir looked upon the being that was being formed, he hated him for his beauty. Aldhumla, the giant cow, went on licking the place where she had breathed. At last a man completely formed stepped from the cliff, Ymir, the ancient giant, hated him so much that he would have slain him then and there. But he knew that if he did this, Audhumla would feed him no more with her milk. Bur was the name of the man who was formed of the ice cliff, Bur, the first of the heroes. He too lived on the milk of Audhumla. He married a daughter of the ancient giant, and he had a son. But Ymir and Ymir's sons hated Bur, and the time came at last when they were able to kill him. And now there was a war between Ymir and Ymir's sons, and the son and sons of Bur. Odin was the son of Bur's son. Odin brought all his brothers together, and they were able to destroy Ymir and all his brood, all except one. So huge was Ymir that when he was slain, his blood poured out in such a mighty flood that his sons were all drowned in it, all except Bergelmir, who was in a boat with his wife when the flood came, and who floated away on the flood to the place we now call Jotunheim, the realm of giants. Now Odin and his son took the body of Ymir, the vastest body that ever was, and they flung it into the chasm of chasms, filling up all the hollow places. They dug the bones out of the body, and they piled them up as the mountains. They took the teeth out, and they made them into rocks. They took the hair of Ymir, and they made him into the forest of the trees. They took his eyebrows and formed them into the place where men now dwell, Midgard. And out of Ymir's hollow skull they made the sky. And Odin and his sons and brothers did more than this. They took the sparks and the clouds of flame that blew from Muspelheim, and they made them into the sun and the moon and all the stars that are in the sky. Odin found a dusky giantess named Night, whose son was called Day, and he gave both of them horses to drive across the sky. Night drove a horse that is named Hrimfaxi, Frosty Mane, and Day drove a horse named Skinfaxi, Shining Mane. And from Hrimfaxi's bit falls the drops that make the dew upon the earth. So, morning dew is horse spit. Then Odin and his sons made a race of men and women and gave them Midgard to live in. Ugly dwarfs had grown up and had spread themselves over the earth. These Odin made go live in the hollow places beneath the earth. The elves he let stay on the earth, but he gave them the task of tending the streams and the grasses and the flowers. And with the Vanir he made peace after war had been waged, taking Njord from them for a hostage. Bergelmir, the giant who escaped drowning in Ymir's blood, had sons and daughters in Jotunheim. They hated Odin and his sons and strove against them. When Odin lighted up the world with the sun and the moon, they were very wroth. And they found two of the fiercest of the mighty wolves of Jotunheim and set them to follow them. And still the sun and the moon, Sol and Mani, are followed by the wolves of Jotunheim. Again, Jotunheim is the realm of giants. Such wonders did Heimdall with the golden teeth tell Hnossa, the youngest of the dwellers in Asgard. Often the child stayed with him by the rainbow bridge and saw the gods pass to and from Midgard. Thor with his crown of stars, and with the great hammer Mjolnir at his hand, with the gloves of iron that he used when he grasped Mjolnir. Thor in his chariot drawn by two goats, and wearing the belt that doubled his strength. Frigga with her dress of falcon feathers, flying swiftly as a bird. Odin, All-Father himself, riding upon Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, clad all in golden armor, with his golden helmet, shaped like an eagle upon his head, and with his spear Gungnir in his hand. Heimdall kept his horn in the branch of a great tree. This tree was called Yggdrasil, he told little Hnossa, and it was a wonder to gods and men. No one knows of a time when Yggdrasil was not growing, and all are afraid to speak of the time when it will be destroyed. Yggdrasil has 3 roots. One goes deep under Midgard, another goes deep under Jotunheim, and the third grows above Asgard. Over Odin's hall a branch of Yggdrasil grows, and it is called the Peace Bow. You see Yggdrasil, little Hnossa, but you do not know all the wonders of it. Far up in its branches 4 stags graze. They shake from their horns the water that falls as rain upon the earth. On the topmost branch of Yggdrasil, the branch that is so high that the gods themselves can hardly see it, there is an eagle that knows all things. Upon the beak of this eagle a hawk is perched, a hawk that sees what the eyes of the eagle may not see. The root of Yggdrasil that is in Midgard goes deep down to the place of the dead. Here there is an evil dragon named Nidhogg that gnaws constantly at the root, striving to destroy Yggdrasil, the tree of trees. And Yatatosk, the squirrel of mischief, behold him now, runs up and down Yggdrasil, making trouble between the eagle above and the dragon below. He goes to tell the dragon how the eagle is bent upon tearing him to pieces, and he goes back to tell the eagle how the dragon plans to devour him. The stories that he brings to Nidhogg make the evil dragon more fierce to destroy Yggdrasil, the tree of trees, so that he may come upon the eagle and devour him. There are 2 wells by the root of Yggdrasil, and one is above, and one is below, and one is beside the root that grows in Jotunheim. This is a well of knowledge. It is guarded by old Mimir the Wise. These things are going to be important later. That in particular. Whoever drinks out of this well knows of all the things that will come to be. The other well is by the root that grows above Asgard. No one may drink out of this well. The 3 sisters that are the holy Norns guard it, and they take the white water from it to Yggdrasil, that the tree of life may keep green and strong. This well, little Hnossa, is called Urda's well. And little Hnossa heard that by Urda's well there were 2 beautiful white swans. They made a music that the dwellers in Asgard often heard. But Hnossa was too young to hear the music that was made by the swans of Urda's well. Alright, so if you stuck with me through all of that, I'll give you a brief summary and then we will get to Odin's story. So, Odin is the grandson of the first heroes, they call them, but kind of men, which were made by Aldhumla, the cow that seems to predate most things, and was resented by Ymir, who was the first giant. So Odin pulls his brothers together, defeats Ymir, all but one and his wife, who go off to Jotunheim and create the race of giants. And they then use Ymir's body to build the parts of the world. And in their description of the world, there's a few key things here. Yggdrasil is a giant inter-realm tree that they travel along to get to different realms. Some of the realms named aren't really going to come up. Niflheim, Muspelheim, Jotunheim doesn't even really come up much here. But it talks about the roots. And it says at the roots there are 2 wells. And that those wells contain the knowledge, and 3 Norns, which are basically protectors of the well, draw water from it and pour it to feed Yggdrasil, the tree. And there is a snake, or not a snake, a dragon named Nidhogg. There is an eagle and a falcon at the top of the tree. And there is a rambunctious little squirrel that runs between and tries to turn them against each other, called Ratatosk. Okay, so let's find out about that grandson. That we call Odin. Now we get to the answer of how Odin lost his eye. The All-Father's forebodings, how he leaves Asgard. So, remember, Asgard is the home of the Aesir. Odin is a part of the Aesir. Thor is a part of the Aesir. Loki's a part of the Aesir. But that's just one race in the tree. They're not elves or dwarves or anything like that. Okay. The All-Father's forebodings, how he leaves Asgard. 2 ravens had Odin All-Father. Hugin and Munin were their names. They flew through all the worlds every day. Coming back to Asgard, they would light on Odin's shoulders and tell him of all things they had seen and heard. And once a day passed without the ravens coming back, then Odin, standing on the watchtower Hildskilf, said to himself, I fear for Hugin, lest he not come back, but I watch more for Munin. A day passed and the ravens flew back. They sat one on each of his shoulders. Then did the All-Father go into the council hall that was beside Glacier, the wood that had made leaves of gold, and hearkened to what Hugin and Munin had to tell him. They told him only of shadows and forebodings. Odin All-Father did not speak to the dwellers in Asgard of the things they told him, but Frigga, his queen, saw in his eyes the shadows and forebodings of things to come. And when he spoke to her about these things, she said, Do not strive against what must take place. Let us go to the holy Norns who sit by Urda's well, and see if the shadows and forebodings will remain when you have looked into their eyes. And so it came that Odin and the gods left Asgard and came to Urda's well, where under the great root of Yggdrasil the 3 Norns sat. With the 2 fair swans below them, Odin went, and Tyr, the great swordsman, and Balder, the most beautiful and best beloved of the gods, and Thor with his hammer. A rainbow bridge went from Asgard, the city of gods, to Midgard, the world of men. But another rainbow bridge, more beautiful and more tremulous still, went from Asgard to that root of Yggdrasil under which was Urda's well. This rainbow bridge was seldom seen by men, and where the ends of the 2 rainbows came together, Heimdall stood. Heimdall with the golden teeth, the watcher for the gods, and the keeper of the way to Urda's well. Open the gate, Heimdall, said the All-Father. Open the gate, for today the gods would visit the holy Norns. Without a word, Heimdall opened wide the gate that led to that bridge, more colored and more tremulous than any rainbow seen from earth. Then did Odin and Tyr and Balder step out on the bridge. Thor followed, but before his foot was placed on the bridge, Heimdall laid his hand upon him. The others may go, but you may not go that way, Thor, said Heimdall. What? Would you, Heimdall, hold me back? Said Thor. Yes, For I am the keeper of the way to the Norns, said Heimdall. You, with the mighty hammer you carry, are too weighty for this way. The bridge I guard would break under you and Thor with the hammer. Nevertheless, I will go visit the Norns with Odin and my comrades, said Thor. But not this way, Thor, said Heimdall. I will not let the bridge be broken under the weight of you and your hammer. Leave your hammer here with me if you would go this way. No, no, said Thor. I will not leave in anyone's charge the hammer that defends Asgard. And I may not be turned back from going with Odin and my comrades. There is another way to Erd as well, said Heimdall. Behold, these two great cloud rivers, Kjormt and Ermt, canst thou wade through them? They are cold and suffocating, but they will bring thee to Erd as well, where sit the three holy Norns. Thor looked out on the two great rolling rivers of cloud. It was a bad way for one to go, cold and suffocating. Yet if he went that way, he could keep on his shoulder the hammer which he would not leave in another's charge. He stepped out into the cloud river that flowed by the Rainbow Bridge, and with this hammer upon his shoulder, he went struggling on to the other river. Odin, Tyr, Balder were beside Erd as well when Thor came struggling out of the cloud river, wet and choking, but with his hammer still upon his shoulder. There stood Tyr, upright and handsome, leaning on his sword that was inscribed all over with magic runes. There stood Balder, smiling, with his head bent, as he listened to the murmur of the two fair swans. And there stood Odin Allfather, clad in his blue cloak, fringed with golden stars, without the eagle helmet upon his head, and with no spear in his hands. The three Norns, Urda, Verdandi, and Skulda, sat beside the well that was in the hollow of the great root of Yggdrasil. Urda was ancient and with white hair, and Verdandi was beautiful, while Skulda could hardly be seen, for she sat far back, and her hair fell over her face and eyes. Urda, Verdandi, and Skulda, they knew the whole of the past, the whole of the present, and the whole of the future. Odin, looking on them, saw into the eyes of Skulda even. Long, long he stood looking on the Norns with the eyes of a god, while the others listening to the murmur of the swans and the falling of the leaves of Yggdrasil into Urda's well. Looking into their eyes, Odin saw the shadows and forebodings that Hugin and Munin told him of take shape and substance, and now others came across the Rainbow Bridge. They were Frigga and Sif and Nanna, the wives of Odin, Thor, and Balder. Frigga looked upon the Norns. As she did, she turned a glance of love and sadness upon Balder, her son, and then she drew back and placed her hand upon Nanna's head. Odin turned from gazing on the Norns and looked upon Frigga, his queenly wife. I would leave Asgard for a while, wife of Odin, he said. Yea, said Frigga, much has to be done in Midgard, the world of men. I would change what knowledge I have into wisdom, said Odin, so that the things that are to happen will be changed into the best that I may be. You would go to Mimir's well, said Frigga. I would go to Mimir's well, said Odin. My husband go, said Frigga. Then they went back over the Rainbow Bridge, that is more beautiful and more tremulous than the one that men see from the earth. They went back over the Rainbow Bridge, the Aesir and the Asinir, Odin and Frigga, Balder and Nanna, Tyr with his sword, and Sif beside Tyr. As for Thor, he went struggling through the cloud rivers, Kormt and Ermt, his hammer Mjolnir upon his shoulder. Good old stubborn Thor. Little Hnossa, the youngest of the dwellers in Asgard, was there, standing beside Heimdall, the watcher for the gods and the keeper of the bridge to Urda's well, when Odin Allfather and Frigga, his queen, went through the great gate with heads bent. Tomorrow, Hnossa heard Odin say, tomorrow I shall be Vegdam, the wanderer, upon the ways of Midgard and Jotunheim. That's part 1. Gonna take a drink of water, and then we'll see how this journey goes. Part 2. So, just to catch you up, in case you lost it, Odin got foreboding of bad things from his 2 ravens that spy about Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life. So, he went to the 3 Norns that look over Urda's well, which feeds the Tree of Life, and looked for knowledge. And he gained some knowledge by looking in their eyes, because of course they wouldn't let him at the well. So, on the advice of his wife Frigga, and his own prerogative, he is now traveling in disguise as Vegdam the Wanderer to the other well, to try and gain wisdom about the things he saw. And there he is in disguise, looking an awful lot like Gandalf. This is long before Lord of the Rings, by the way. Even this book's publishing in its art. Ooh, yeah. Love it when a character rides a stag. Okay, now we will figure out what happened to Odin's eye. It's a myth. It takes a while for them to get to the point. They had time. Odin goes to Mimir's well, his sacrifice for wisdom. And so Odin, no longer riding on Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, no longer wearing his golden armor and his eagle helmet, without even his spear in his hand, traveled through Midgard, the world of men, and made his way toward Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. No longer was he called Odin Allfather, but Vegdam the Wanderer. He wore a cloak of dark blue and carried a traveler's staff in his hand. And now, as he went toward Mimir's well, which was near to Jotunheim, he came upon a giant riding on a great stag. Odin seemed a man to men and a giant to giants. He went beside the giant on the great stag, and the 2 talked together. "Who art thou, O brother?" Odin asked the giant. "I am Vafthrudr, the wisest of the giants," said the one who was riding on the stag. Odin knew him then. Vafthrudr was indeed the wisest of the giants, and many went to strive to gain wisdom from him. But those who went to him had to answer the riddles of Vafthrudr asked, and if they failed to answer, the giant took their heads off. "I am Vegdam the Wanderer," Odin said, "and I know who thou art, O Vafthrudr. I would strive to learn something from thee." The giant laughed, showing his teeth. "Oh," he said, "I am ready for a game with thee. Dost thou know the stakes? My head to thee if I cannot answer any question thou wilt ask, and if thou canst not answer any question that I may ask, then thy head goes to me. And now let us begin." "I am ready," Odin said. "Then tell me," said Vafthrudr. "Tell me the name of the river that divides Asgard from Jotunheim." "Ifling is the name of that river," said Odin. Ifling that is dead cold, yet never frozen. Thou hast answered rightly, O wanderer, said the giant, but thou hast still to answer other questions. What are the names of the horses that day and night drive across the sky? Skinfaxi and Hrimfaxi, Odin answered. Vafthrudr was startled to hear one say the names that were known only to the gods and to the wisest of the giants. There was only one question now that he might ask before it came to the stranger's turn to ask him questions. Tell me, said Vafthrudr, what is the name of the plain on which the last battle will be fought? The plain of Vigard, said Odin. The plain that is 100 miles long and 100 miles across. It was now Odin's turn to ask Vafthrudr questions. What will be the last words that Odin will whisper into the ear of Baldur, his dear son? He asked. Very startled was the giant Vafthrudr at that question. He sprang to the ground and looked at the stranger keenly. Only Odin knows what his last words to Baldur will be, he said, and only Odin would have asked that question. Thou art Odin, O wanderer, and thy question I cannot answer. Then, said Odin, if thou wouldst keep thy head, answer me this. What price will Mimir ask for a draught from the well of wisdom that he guards? He will ask thy right eye as a price, O Odin, said Vafthrudr. Will he ask no less a price than that? Said Odin. He will ask no less a price. Many have come to him for a draught from the well of wisdom, but no one yet has given the price Mimir asks. I have answered thy questions, O Odin. Now give up thy claim to my head and let me go on my way. I give up my claim unto thy head, said Odin. Then Vafthrudr, the wisest of the giants, went on his way, riding on his great stag. It was a terrible price that Mimir would ask for a draught from the well of wisdom, and very troubled was Odin Allfather when it was revealed to him. His right eye! For all time to be without sight of his right eye. Almost he would have turned back to Asgard, giving up his quest for wisdom. He went on, turning neither to Asgard nor to Mimir's well, and then he went towards the south. And when he went towards the south, he saw Muspelheim, where stood Surtur, the flaming sword, a terrible figure, who would one day join the giants in their war against the gods. And when he turned north, he heard the roaring of the cauldron of Helgelme, as it poured itself out of Niflheim, the place of darkness and dread. And Odin knew that the world must not be left between Surtur, who would destroy it with fire, and Niflheim, that would gather it back into darkness and nothingness. He, the eldest of the gods, would have to win the wisdom that would help to save the world. And so, with his face stern in front of his loss and pain, Odin Allfather turned and went towards Mimir's well. It was under the great root of Yggdrasil, the root that grew out of Jotunheim. And there sat Mimir, the guardian of the well of wisdom, with his deep eyes bent upon the deep water. And Mimir, who had drunk every day from the well of wisdom, knew who it was that stood before him. Hail, Odin, eldest of the gods, he said. Then Odin made reverence to Mimir, the wisest of the world's being. I would drink from your well, Mimir, he said. There is a price to be paid. All who have come here to drink have shrunk from paying that price. Will you, eldest of the gods, pay for it? I will not shrink from the price that has to be paid, Mimir, said Odin Allfather. Then drink, said Mimir. He filled up a great horn with water from the well and gave it to Odin. Odin took the horn in both his hands and drank, and as he drank, all the future became clear to him. He saw the sorrows and troubles that would fall upon men and gods, but he saw too why the sorrows and troubles had to fall, and he saw how they might be borne so that gods and men, by being noble in the days of sorrow and trouble, would leave in the world a force that one day, a day that was far off indeed, would destroy the evil that brought terror and sorrow and despair into the world. Then when he had drunk out of the great horn that Mimir had given him, he put his hand to his face, and he plucked out his right eye. Terrible was the pain that Odin All-Father endured, but he made no groan nor moan. He bowed his head and put his cloak before his face, as Mimir took the eye and let it sink deep, deep into the water of the Well of Wisdom. And there the eye of Odin stayed, shining up through the water, a sign to all who came to that place of the price that the Father of the Gods had paid for his wisdom. And there you go. That's why Odin wears an eye patch in Marvel and pretty much all depictions. He plucked out his right eye to gain wisdom. Importantly, distinct from knowledge here, because he had gathered some knowledge by looking in the eyes of the three who guarded Earth as well, but Mimir guarded the Well of Wisdom, and so knowledge alone was not enough. He couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. It was with wisdom he did it. And he did it because, according to the tale, that he did it because he needed that wisdom for the coming troubles. But what he discovers is that much of those troubles are what's needed to prepare themselves for the troubles. And it's interesting because it gives this sense that the gods in Norse mythology are not as all-powerful as maybe conceptions in, Christian or Islam or even Jewish followings. They don't really sit above the designs of the world. The world predates them and has its own sort of ancient, inscrutable designs, like grains in Yggdrasil, that they have no role in, and puts them more in a position of somebody who understands it best and seeks to protect their sort of heirs, if you will, as they best can. It's a really famous tale, but I don't think many people know it anymore. It's one of the two most famous tales involving Odin. Odin was known for his pursuit of wisdom. One other thing before we sort of call it a day here. You'll notice, if you are a Tolkien fan, that if nothing else, it has the feel of Tolkien lore. And that's not accidental. Tolkien read this stuff. Maybe even the book we're reading, because it was written around right before he would have been in university. These are the sorts of things that he was reared on, if you will, from his mother and his schooling and so on. And he very specifically takes from Norse mythology. He takes from a few things, but above all, he really takes from Norse mythology. And probably the biggest evidence of that, which wasn't him being coy, is Midgard. He translates to Middle Earth. That is because Earth sits in the middle of Yggdrasil. And there's reference to the Vanir, which is obviously a very similar name to the Valar. And I don't think that's accidental either. We didn't see any of it here, but there's a great deal of rings of power and such in Norse mythology. He doesn't take all his conceptions from the source. It's very clear that Wagner's ring operas, which also pull from Norse mythology, but has its own sort of interpretations of things, Wagner's ring operas definitely had an influence. I think he was pretty explicit about that. And Wagner's ring operas, if you don't know, besides being pretty questionable because Wagner was an incredibly rabid anti-Semite, is Wagner's ring operas are about a ring forged, in this case by dwarves, I believe, or taken by dwarves? It's been a while since I looked at the summary. And he also took a great deal from that. So it's not accidental, and a great deal of his inspiration and so on comes from this. And I guess as a writer, if nothing else, one of the reasons I wanted to read it is to show you two things. The value of reading primary source, kind of. Well, I mean, this is secondary. I can't read Old Norse. But earlier, less filtered and more challenging versions of tales from the past in mythology and history, because you never know what content will strike your fancy and inspire new content, as it did with Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion and all of his world. And then the second thing I wanted to note is to not to sweat it too much. If you feel like you're writing something and you do get inspired by it and you go, I don't know, it's just kind of derivative. Yeah, well, I mean, I really enjoy Lord of the Rings, but if you were a Norse scholar, it would feel very derivative, and that's fine, because he still had his own viewpoints and his own designs and his own inspirations. But anyways, this is not unqualified advice. That's for Thursday. Again, if you want to read this book on your own, it's a wonderful book. It's an easy read. It's a free ebook that you can get from Project Gutenberg called The Children of Odin, the Book of Northern Myths. And I think it was one of the better written ones I found, and that's why I chose to read it here tonight. If you haven't, you should check out our website. It's varietal-literature.ca. We put stories up there because Varietal is a group of Vancouver writers in a little writers commune. And on Thursday, we do more original content, not just reading. We do a stream where myself and usually others, not sometimes just me, write things live while chat tries to screw us up. We call that the Varietal Show. You can watch some of the old ones on the playlist on this channel. And if you haven't already, give a like, thumbs up for Odin's right eye, which he gave to have the wisdom to save us when Ragnarok comes and he has to fight the giants of Jotunheim. Vanessa said, came for the tale, stayed for the wonderful Rory wisdom. Oh, thank you. Then beyond that, you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. That's at varietal_lit. You can find all this stuff down below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we have a little thing going that if we get 50 subscribers, I will read a poem that is 50% the F word about a place I hate in the place near where I live, which I've never read aloud to anybody, but it came up and people wanted to hear it. So if we get 50 subscribers, I will read it, and then we'll pretend like it's something to be taken seriously, because that'll be funny. Beyond that, we have some stuff that probably will be out this week. Something from pre-recorded from Avalon. I'm hoping for the weekend or maybe even sooner, so keep an eye on the channel for that. And tune back in Thursday, 6:30 p.m. to watch the Varietal Show with many of our writers. And if you just want more to read, check out my 4-part story, which just finished out this week on Varietal Literature. The link is below. And beyond that, take care of your eyes and get a good sleep. And thank you very much, chat, for being here with me in the lodge. I'll go prep the bed. And you dream of Yggdrasil.